Good morning, one and all, and welcome to the main object big book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David. It's, as always, a blessing to be here with all of you. I'm very excited to be here today, as I mentioned, and um, so and I was chatting it up so much I forgot to ask anybody to read the preamble. I'm gonna reach across the pond if I can and ask our friend Suki. Suki, would you be so kind? I'm going to put it up on the screen. If you would read, where is it? There it is. The AA preamble. I'm sorry, Suki, I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. I'm Suki, I'm an alcoholic. AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is the desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Suki, thank you so much. And I'd like to welcome everybody who is here this morning. And also, now, if I'd like to ask you if you would join me in welcoming God into this meeting by reciting the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thy will, not mine, be done. The first thing I'd like to do, folks, I mentioned this to some folks beforehand. Let's going to see if I was playing with Zoom technology. I want to see if this works. Because today, of course, is the 18th. A week from today will be the 25th, Christmas Day and Christmas morning. So, just FYI, I am, just because of my schedule and my demands, I am absolutely fine and meeting and getting together. But let's see, does this work? Can we do? Okay. I am launching. Does everybody see a poll on your screen? Oh, there you go. Okay. I've graduated to a new level. Should we meet on Christmas morning? We're going to make this a democratic process. I'll just give it a few seconds. Oh, this is fun. And I'm going to
I don't
closing it
understand what
out.
we're
Three,
supposed to
two,
do.
one, and so by a 2-1 margin, the vote is yes. So we will meet a week from this morning. So and I'm assuming I didn't want to put New Year's in there, but that'll be the same for New Year's. Then we'll meet New Year's Day, and so great. I will celebrate Christmas with all of you.
Just a note, David, to throw out there on the poll. I don't know that the co-hosts can vote. Did you have the same experience, Donna?
Yeah, I couldn't vote. I couldn't figure out what we were supposed to do.
Oh,
It doesn't give me an option.
Just an FYI.
okay. I'll take a look at that. So moving onward, then, at this meeting, as I think most people have been here before, but if you haven't, just very quickly, we are a line by line big book study. We are not. If you're looking for a meeting that zooms through the book in express fashion, we are not that meeting. But please stick around anyway because we have a fun time. We go line by line. and we're diving into the deeper meaning of the book and what it says for our recovery. And what we do is we break the text down into 5 different categories. I've shared these before, I'll share them again. And there they are: questions, directions and explanations, promises, warnings, and history. The colors you see next to some of those are highlighter colors. That's totally arbitrary that I chose. You can choose your own colors. But what I find is that by breaking the text down into these categories, none of it, first of all, is taken in the spirit of this is a rule, this is absolutely a question, this is absolutely a promise. It's more a guide, it's more a loose guide to help me understand the text and to, more importantly, help me share the text with other people. So, and in terms of sharing this morning, I'll just let you know that the format for this morning's meeting is that I'll share on the text for approximately about 22 minutes now. I'll go until about 7 o'clock, and then we'll open it up for questions and feedback and anything else that may come up. I'm going to put the notes in. I'm going to get the timing of this down one of these days, but let's see if I can do this. Because I did work on some notes for the meeting that have things relevant to what we're going to talk about today. And in case you're wondering what we are talking about, wow, that is not copying. Okay, we'll figure that out. We are in the 4th edition, page 3. We are working our way through Bill's story, and we are in the middle of page 3 for the next few years. Fortune through money and applause my way. And what I want to do, I'm going to try this one more time because this is, oh man, it is not. I'm just going to try one more time. Sorry, folks. A little technical glitch here. And I want to see if I can get this to copy, because I have information that you're going to, that I wanted anyway to share with you as we go through the text. No. Okay. Anyway, we'll work that part out. Stay tuned. This section goes from the middle of page 3 to near the bottom of page 4. It is section 3 of Bill's story. It is called Fierce Determination. That's what I called it. You could also call it, in another sense, Fierce Delusion, because what we see in this section is that Bill's disease is really taking a hold of him, his life, his decision-making purposes, his decision-making faculties, I should say, and really starting to chart the course of his life. Although, of course, he does not see that. I sort of subtitle it Fierce Delusion because remember that part where, in the doctor's opinion, where it talks about we are recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And one of the things that I realized after a time sober was that they were talking about something more than when they say we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. They were talking about something bigger, something more encompassing than just my drinking problem. And that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, what we are seeing is today is we are seeing Bill in the grips of that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And how do I come to that is I see what we'll see with Bill when we look at this part of Bill's story is this growing inability to connect actions with consequence, to solve a problem in a way that actually makes things better for him and those about him. Now, he thinks that's what he's doing, but he's actually having the opposite impact. And that, I believe, is an integral part of the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. With every fiber of our being, we are sure we are turning left, but to any outside observer, we're turning right, if that makes sense. So anyway, I'm going to jump in. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. You often hear that line quoted. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. All of that I've read to this point, I have highlighted in pink as a warning. And one of the things I think that is important, you may realize this, is now we're talking to approximately the mid 1920s to the late 1920s. Now we all know and have heard about the Great Depression, which happened in 1929. But I think for what we're reading today, what's important to recognize is what happened before the Great Depression, which was the 1920s stock boom. You know, when they talk today about like a housing bubble or the mortgage bubble or something like that, where prices get artificially inflated and then there's this huge collapse that follows. And what Bill is talking about when he has arrived and money throwing fame and fortune his way, he is getting caught up. He's a stock speculator. He's getting caught up in that boom. And I read a little bit of history on this, and this was a time where you could go to your corner barber shop and the barber would have a chart on the wall of his stock tips. Everybody was getting stock tips and everybody was getting rich. But it was all this, everything was going up artificially, which is why it crashed so drastically in 1929. There was loud talk in the jazz places uptown. Everyone spent in thousands and chattered in millions. And I don't have that highlighted. I see that more as just history, but you could see that as a warning. This sort of artificial, they call it artificial exuberance, which means there's this enthusiasm, but it's not really grounded in reality. It's this hope. And this next line isn't important though. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I made a host of fair weather friends. That one line, scoffers could scoff and be damned, I have that highlighted in pink as a warning. And the reason is, remember we were, at the beginning of Bill's story, we talked about he had encountered several warnings. One was from the people he grew up with. The other was through the Winchester Cathedral and the Hampshire Grenadier. And those warnings gave him pause back then. He didn't heed them, but at least they gave them pause. Now, Bill, the scoffers are the people who are saying, these are the ones on, like today, they'd be on CNBC or something that says, you know, folks, don't go crazy buying all these stocks because this thing's not real and it's going to crash and it's going to be painful. Those are the kind of scoffers that Bill's talking about. But notice that Bill is experiencing warnings now, but his attitude isn't like, well, I'm going to think about this. His attitude is, they can be damned. So Bill is really caught up in the mania that is going on right now. And talking about getting caught up in the mania, I jumped ahead because what I wanted to do also is I wanted to put out there 3 questions for reflection, and I will do my best to get these in the chat. They're not copying and pasting for some reason. But just think about this, and again, this is not do or die, so don't worry if you don't get this exactly, but Just some questions to reflect on as we do this reading today. And because we're talking about consequences and actions and consequences being disconnected. And so the first question is, as my drinking and its consequences became more intense, how did my ego and grandiosity respond or grow? Because one of the things we'll see in this reading today is that as Bill gets more, a greater number of warning signs, as consequences start to land at his feet, not only does he not step back and reflect and say, well, I better change course here, he doubles down. He says, scoffers be scoffed and be damned. So it's one thing to think about that and take it as a sort of a biographical sketch of our co-founder, but I think the real lesson here is to apply that to our own drinking. So as things started to crash, how did we take that and double down? The second question, did I ever experience unjustified confidence in my own potential and abilities? And the third question, did I experience a turning point when I could no longer save myself? And we'll see that Bill gets to that point by the end of our reading today. And John, I see your hand up.
John, alcoholic, just a quick comment. Alcohol has given Bill a lot of false courage, and he has thrown caution to the wind, which I did many times when I was drinking my brains out. You just smirk at everything, and you don't want to listen to anybody who's saying, maybe you ought to get it, and that's what alcohol did to me in my own mind. False courage, and just started doing things that the normal person might consider foolish or even dangerous. Thank you for letting me share.
John, thank you. And moving onward, my drinking assumed more serious proportions, continuing all day and almost every night. The remonstrances of my friends terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. And just to break that down, I turned to my 1939 dictionary for the word remonstrances. I thought I knew what it meant, but I wanted to be sure. And a remonstrance is a strong complaint against something. So what Bill is saying here, now we talked a few lines ago, scoffers could scoff and be damned. So those are people that are criticizing how they're handling finances, how others are handling finances the way Bill is handling them. But now this is more direct. This is about people who are taking issue with Bill's drinking. And what does Bill do? Bill protests, and not lightly either. He gets in a fight. He probably defends his drinking and gets angry at people who would say anything. And it continues that theme of this unnatural exuberance, this unwarranted confidence. And so what did he do? He became a lone wolf. He did not have the ability. Remember, we're talking about a seemingly hopeless case of mind and body. He is incapable of taking input from his environment and from his circumstances and using that to constructively adjust his own actions. He doesn't have that ability. So what does he do? He starts drinking alone. That's his solution. There were many unhappy scenes in my sumptuous apartment. And all of those sentences up to this point, forgive me, I didn't mention this, are as a warning. There had been no real infidelity, for loyalty to my wife, helped at times by extreme drunkenness, helped me out of those scrapes. We could have a whole meeting about those, about that last sentence. All I'm going to say is that if you would like to know more of the facts, rather than maybe a twinge of wishful thinking on Bill's part, there are some great biographies out there that you can check out on Bill W. and his tenuous relationship with discretion and the opposite sex. Let's just put it that way. And moving forward, but that's not why we're here today. Moving forward, in 1929, I contracted golf fever. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud while I to overtake Walter Hagen. I read that for years, no idea who Walter Hagen was. I finally looked it up, and what I realized is what I learned when I looked it up is Walter Hagen is the known as the father of professional golfing, and he is prior to, of course, Tiger Woods, prior to Jack Nicklaus. When you wanted to hold up an example of like the ultimate in golfers, the person that you held up as an example was Walter Hagen. As a matter of fact, in the sort of golfing Hall of Fame, he is considered today he is considered the number 3 best golfer of all time, behind first Jack Nicklaus, second Tiger Woods, and then there's Walter Hagen. And so, and remember, Bill could not, his ego, he could not stand to not be the number 1 man. So he's not golfing for fun. He's not golfing for relaxation. He's not golfing for business purposes. He's golfing to overtake the best golfer of all time, Walter Hagen. Liquor caught up with me much faster than I came up behind Walter. I began to be jittery in the morning. Golfing permitted drinking every day and every night. It was fun to carom around the exclusive course which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. Remember, Bill's talking about I had arrived. He's living the life he always looked upon. He saw others living and said, I want to live that life. And now he's living that life. But can we see how it's not on a solid foundation? He's having fights with people. He's separating himself from people. He is drinking daily. And I just want to back up a second. First of all, I do not have any of this highlighted. You could put it as a warning for sure. And I also want to mention the word carom, and I looked it up, and that is the correct pronunciation, I believe. It is pronounced, it was fun to carom around the exclusive course which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I thought that meant like just carting around in golf carts. Carom actually means, it doesn't mean that. It means to strike and rebound. So, you know what else? The image I got when you think of in a golf cart caroming around is bumper cars. So Bill played bumper cars with the golf carts. So they use it a lot, that term carom. They use it a lot in billiards because, you'll strike a billiard ball and it'll rebound, and that's how, you do strategy. But here it means that Bill's basically smashing up golf carts. And which I never realized till I looked it up. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amused skepticism. Bill is becoming quite a character at this point. His golf game's not all that great. He's getting in a lot of fights. He's drunk every day, or at least drinking every day. He is caught up in this unwarranted stock market enthusiasm. So he's coming off like a bit of a hot mess. However, he has an amazing tan. So, and I'm making a joke, but on the other hand, there's some dark truth to this, because what's driving all of this? Ego, and the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Abruptly, in October 1929, hell broke loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from a hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of the tape which bore the inscription XYZ32. It had been 52 that morning. I was finished, and so were many friends. And I just have that blank as history. The one thing that I will mention is that I did do a little bit of digging into Bill's biography. And in the crash of 29, Bill was in $2022, Bill was approximately $625,000 in debt. So the chickens came home to roost, at least financially. And John, yes, please.
Real quick, carom means to bounce around aimlessly from place to place, never staying in one place very long. Sort of like a ping pong ball bouncing around off walls. No particular direction, I think. No thoughtful direction, just caroming. I go here, don't stay there very long. I go there. I bounce from place to place to place to place. No particular thought pattern. Real solid idea of what you're going to do. You're just bouncing around like a loose ping pong ball off the walls. And I suspect that relationships, he caromed around in relationships too. Friends who got wise to him, and he left one relationship, bounced to another, left that one, bounced to another. And that's what alcohol does for you. You don't know what you're talking about half the time, and nobody really bothers to hold on to you. So you just move on to somebody else, unsuspecting. You lose them too. And that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, I'm going to, it's 7 now, but I think I can, if you'll just allow me another 2 minutes or so, I think I can get to the end here. The rest of this paragraph, from the papers reported men all the way, I have that as pink and warning, and I'll explain why in a moment. The papers reported men jumping to death from the towers of high finance. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. My friends had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. So let's just take a moment and think about Bill's mindset. This is, up to that point, one of the most tragic days or tragic experiences in American history. probably at the time it ranked right up there next to the American Civil War, is the crash of the stock market. People were jumping out of the skyscrapers because they thought they were ruined financially. What's Bill's reaction? Does he have compassion? Does he take a step back? Does he think, wow, maybe there's a lesson in this for me? Bill's mindset is he is disgusted by the people who did not fight, who were seen as being overtaken by circumstances, and he got that alcohol fueled confidence. And so I have all of that as warning. And I just want to ask you all to put a mental bookmark into something where he talks about that fierce determination to win came back. Because as Bill continues to drink, we'll see not today, but next week, in next week's section, we will see how that fierce determination to win fades. And Bill loses that. But just moving onward, next morning I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money left and thought I had better go to Canada. And I have that just blank as history. However, the rest of this I have as warning. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. He had re-arrived. I felt like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. Okay. First of all, isn't it instructive? Financially, Bill dodged a major bullet. He was facing ruin, but he got it back, at least temporarily. What lesson does he take from that? Did he look at his behavior or himself and make adjustments? Instead, no, he envisions himself as Napoleon, as the emperor of the conquered world. Now, returning from Elba, Napoleon was exiled. I looked this up, and if I'm not able to post the links today, when I post the video, all of these links will be posted in the description of the video, because Napoleon was exiled twice near the end of his reign. The first time was he had suffered a defeat and his enemies banished him to Elba. And when he was banished to Elba, Napoleon reinvigorated himself and came back stronger than ever. But then he lost a second time and was then banished forever, not to ever come back. And the second time he was banished to Saint Helena. So that is the historical context there. So he's basically, I was banished, but now, like you've heard this in like TV and movies, baby, I'm back. And Bill was thinking that, like, I am back. And but drinking caught up with me again, and my generous friend had to let me go. He's living in Canada, and he has a benefactor, a guy who's sort of taking him under his wing. But because Bill I read a little bit of AA history, because Bill was getting into so many fights at the country club and with clients, his benefactor had to say, Bill, there's nothing, I gotta cut my ties to you, buddy. And Bill was starting to be seen as toxic by his professional peers. This next line is chilling. This time we stayed broke. There's a turning point for Bill. and I'm just going to hit two things. He's hit a point where he could no longer talk his way around his own consequences. And he couldn't come back after this point. And that's the end, by the way. That is the end of section 3. Next week, we'll start with section 4. But I also, here's something that's instructive. His drinking and his fighting and his bad judgment has impacted both him and his wife. And he says, here's all the things I did. This time we stayed broke. Like, here's what I did. And honey, here's how it's impacting you. So I think that's instructive for how us alcoholics think. So anyway, thank you for indulging me. I went way over. I'm just going to ask one question, and then Kathy, I see your hand. And food for thought. When he says, and this time we stayed broke, is this Bill's bottom? And I'm going to jump ahead and say, no, it's not. And why is it not? Even though it may be his career bottom, actually, that's not even true because he goes much lower. But the reason that I recognize this as not being Bill's bottom is because he does not yet see the need for an alternative design for living. He doesn't see his design for living as the problem. So Bill has not hit bottom. And with that, I'm going to open it up. Thank you for indulging me in my pontifications on that part of Bill's story. Kathy, I see your hand. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so a couple of things that you mentioned. You were using the term unwarranted confidence. And what was going through my mind the entire time was the furthering of this disconnect from reality, both in what was actually happening historically around him, to his friends and just the world as it related to Wall Street and, of course, Walter Hagen, those delusions. And he seemed to be measuring himself only as he related to the outside world in this delusional sense. There was no introspection. There was none of that. The other thing was, and maybe I am jumping ahead. I apologize if I am. And just on a meeting last night that put it, very clearly to me, which is all the stuff that I may or may not lose does not constitute the bottom. And I didn't personally lose all the stuff, but I nevertheless reached that emotional pit of hell that for me, just done. And that to me was my bottom anyhow. And when it was undeniable, like you said here, this time we stayed broke, when certain events just hit you with reality. You know what I mean? Like, whoa, this is actually happening. So I'll end it there. Thanks, guys.
Kathy, thank you so much. My friend Brian D.
Hi, everybody. I'm an alcoholic. My name's Brian. Good to be here sober this morning. And thanks so much, David. I think that the two things that jumped out as you were talking, as we were reading, one is the first time I read this stuff, or maybe the first few times, my consuming self-pity, that I read the story about everything crashes. He has a friend in Canada and he gets bailed out. And then he stays broke and all this other disaster. The only thing I took out of that was I don't have a rich friend in Canada who's taking me out of this. It's easy for him. That's how I actually process this, despite all of the other stuff. I just filtered it out. And I had to kind of learn how not to do that in AA because I was not uniquely the person who had suffered the most from alcoholism. But the second thing is that characteristic that Bill had that you were describing, the kind of drive, the ability to go forward, the ability to go forward sometimes in the face of all evidence to the contrary. it can be the asset and defect, and he could only see it as the asset. That, in some senses, I have my version of that. In AA, that can be an asset. The ability to like keep writing inventory even when I don't want to. The ability to keep moving forward even when part of me doesn't want to turns out to be a great asset. The problem is that I learned through the 7-step. One of the things I learned about that is that the fact that I can do it doesn't always make it an asset, and sometimes my ability to keep going means I'm caroming through life to the people around me. And so anyway, great. Thanks for sharing about that.
Thank you, Brian. I remember when, well, first of all, what keeps, I want to just throw this out there just as another point of reference. There is a little later in the text, it talks about, it mentions people telling their story about getting sober. And it says something that really kind of took me off guard for years. Leaving aside the drink question, they talked about how living was, and I'm paraphrasing, living was so hard going for them. And I never quite understood that, because it's a, well, what do you mean it's not about the drink question? And what we're seeing here is, yes, Bill definitely mentions the drink question. He's talking about drinking every day. But we're also seeing that in addition to that, he has these other things going on that are intertwined with the daily drinking, but at the same time separate from it. And that's what he's talking about, is that his overwhelming sense of ego and superiority. Joe, yes.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to say that I identify with Bill in terms of all the resentments that show up in this story. Scoffers be scoffed at, damn, that's a resentment. Walter Hagen, he thought that Walter Hagen was better than him. That's a resentment. His friend in Canada, the fair weather friends, he had resentments against everyone, and that was his reason for becoming a lone wolf. And I really identify with all of that. And it's the resentments really that kept me in believing that I was right. That's all I got. Thank you.
Joe, thank you. I remember when I came in, just on this point once again, because thinking about those questions about how as things started to fall apart and the wheels started to fall off, was I immediate in my ability to look at my consequences and make adjustments? Absolutely not. In fact, I thought that my problem was that I wasn't aiming high enough, that my confidence wasn't great enough. And just to put a humorous spin on this, when I heard, I came to AA and they talked about from Yale to jail. In the midst of my drunken downfall, I thought the thing I need to do is apply to Ivy League universities for graduate school. So this is no lie. When they talk about from Yale to jail, I related to that because I visited both of those institutions in the same 30-day period. So anyway, John, yes, please go ahead.
John, alcoholic again. I've always liked Bill's story, and Walter Hagen was a pro. A lot of practice, a lot of years playing. And Bill shows up at this country club, and he's got this grandiose idea that he's going to be Walter Hagen. It's going to be like him. But I doubt, with all his drinking, did he ever put in, 15 minutes of practice. He spent most of his time bouncing around the country club, buttonholing people, shaking hands, glad-handing people. That's where he was. He had this grandiose idea that he was going to be something. And that's what alcohol did to me. Made me feel like I was going to be something, but I didn't have the power, the will, the desire, the means to back it up. It was a fantasy. And I relate a lot to not Bill himself as an individual, but the effect alcohol had on him and also had on me. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are a little over, but I just want to acknowledge Brother Robbie, I saw you had your hand up. Did you want to share any thoughts?
I know we're at the time, that's why I put it down. I'll just real briefly say that when Bill Wilson said I had arrived, right? I was thinking, to myself, we need another highlighter in red for every time ego, right? The alcoholic ego is brought about. And, it's the same with me. Like, even when I was newer in AA, like, well, I don't need that big book. Well, I don't need that. And men with the men and women with the women. Oh God, that's for people that don't know how to handle relationships, and, come on, and so that ego is so big for us alcoholics, me especially. And I think Bill really exemplifies that here very well. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Our next section is remember, I mentioned that it's not Bill's bottom because he did not yet see the need for an alternative design for living. And our next section, which starts at the bottom of page 4, is called "This Had to Be Stopped." It is, and we'll see in that section how Bill now enters this phase where he clearly identifies his drinking as a problem, but he still does not yet identify his design for living as being intimately tied to his drinking. As a result, he remains powerless, and the downfall continues. And so, on that cliffhanger, I will also say, anybody, I think I have an issue with my Zoom app today because it's not letting me post anything here. But for anybody who is up for another meeting, GMA online is starting at 7:30 with a Big Book Promises meeting. I'll just give you the code. It's just a 9-digit code with, oh, there it is. Thank you, Rich. 477-261-855. And so we will be here next week for Christmas. And so I'm so glad I'm back. Thank you all for hanging in there while I was off on sick leave. And now I'm going to ask you all to unmute and join me in closing out this meeting with the Lord's Prayer.